Again, we're going to be continuing the book of Isaiah, chapter 37, verses 15 through 22. Now, before we can dive into these verses, we must do what we always do. We must back up, discuss what we talked about last week so that we keep everything in its proper context. Now, last week, we made our way into chapter 37, verses 8 through 15. And so I'm going to do a brief recap here. I'm going to do a brief recap, and I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. So if you recall, Isaiah has prophesied to the northern and the southern kingdom for them to keep their faith in him. He will be their protector. He will be their provider. Now we know what has the northern and the southern kingdom done. They have rebelled against God. They brought false idols into their lands. They made a mockery of his commands. So here we have the prophet Isaiah who was sent. And he kept telling the northern and southern kingdom time and time again, place your faith in him alone. He will be your provider. He will be your protector. And yet time and time again, what does the northern and the southern kingdom do? They keep rebelling against the Holy of Holies. So it is through the words of Isaiah that he tells them, the Assyrian army is coming for you. That they are coming for you. He gets specific. He even tells them the name of the empire that's going to be attacking them. And what did the northern and the southern kingdom do? Did they repent? Did they turn to God? Did they beg for his protection? No. They continue to rely upon themselves. Now the northern kingdom is, at this point of the story, practically destroyed by the Assyrians. There's lands around the southern kingdom that have also been taken over. So we have Jerusalem and the walls surrounding Jerusalem, and that's where King Hezekiah is, the king of the southern kingdom. Now, King Hezekiah is a righteous king. It's something that the southern kingdom hasn't had in a while, but here they have King Hezekiah, and Hezekiah is trying to reform the land. He's removing the false idols from the temple, and he's striving to live a righteous life that is pleasing to God, and he is striving to bring the southern kingdom along with him. But here, Isaiah has prophesied that the Assyrian Empire is coming for them to bring his wrath upon them. It's here in the story that Assyria is now closing in on Jerusalem. Every land they come upon, they conquer, they take, they devour. So they're just miles away from Jerusalem when King Sennacherib, that being the king of Assyria, sends 3 representatives and an elite force of killers. He sends them to Jerusalem. King Hezekiah, remember the righteous king over Jerusalem, he gets word of this. So King Hezekiah, he gets his 3 representatives, and he sends his representatives to the wall. So you got the 3 representatives of King Sennacherib, that being of Syria, and the 3 representatives of the southern kingdom, that being for King Hezekiah. Now it's pretty much a monologue that takes place, and it's primarily the Assyrians that are doing the talking by a gentleman whose title is the Rabshakeh. And in the Rabshakeh, what is he telling them? Pretty much bow a knee to the king of Assyria. You bow the knee to him, we will let you live. We're still going to take your land. We're still going to remove you from this land, but you bow the knee and you shall live. And then the Rabshakeh goes on to mock God, the one true God, saying that he cannot protect you. There's no need in praying to him. So it's at this point in time, the meeting is over. The 3 representatives of King Hezekiah really didn't say much. That could be because King Hezekiah commanded them not to. But after the meeting, the 3 reps, they ripped their clothes because they've mocked God. So they bring this information to King Hezekiah, and they tell him exactly what happened. He said, either bend the knee or don't bend the knee, but either way, he's coming to take the land. But if we bend the knee, we live. Not here, but we'll live. And then you see the righteousness of King Hezekiah because he gets this information. He too tears his clothes because they have mocked God. They blasphemed God. But then he puts on a sackcloth and he goes into the house of the Lord and he prays. So you're seeing through these verses leading up to this point how the southern kingdom finally has a righteous king that God has given them. Now, King Hezekiah isn't perfect, for he hasn't placed all of his faith in God. We know that he was still paying the Egyptian army for protection against the Assyrians. We also know that he was actually paying the Assyrians not to attack them. They got a little carried away there. I don't know why my voice went up like that. I got excited. Attack them. Anyway, so here's the message. King Hezekiah praying in the temple. Then the Rabshakeh returns back to give the report to King Sennacherib. Now, King Sennacherib isn't in the same place that he once was. They were in Lachish. They conquered Lachish. Now they're in Libnah. And they've done the same there. So the Rabshakeh goes to King Sennacherib. And he lays out the report before them. But then something else happens. King Sennacherib, that being of Assyria, gets the word that the Cushites are coming for them. When King Sennacherib, when he hears this, he's like, okay, we're gonna crush the hope that King Hezekiah may receive from this message. King Hezekiah may have heard about the Cushites coming to attack us also. But we're going to send another message back to King Hezekiah. The message is this. Paraphrasing. It doesn't lay out this way. Paraphrasing. Listen, the Cushites are coming for us. That's what we've heard. But I don't care. It doesn't matter. We've destroyed everyone who's gotten in our way. And we're still coming for you. We're still coming for you, O Jerusalem. Your God cannot save you. That's the message that was delivered to King Hezekiah. So King Hezekiah, once again, he goes to the house of the Lord and he lays out this message before God. You just see his faith growing stronger and stronger in the Lord. But at the same time, King Hezekiah has also sent 2 of his reps to go see Isaiah. Now, this hasn't happened before. And he's telling them, I want you to tell Isaiah everything that has taken place. And tell Isaiah that we know that the only way that we can be rescued, the only way that we can be saved is through God. No more are we paying the Egyptians. No more are we paying the Assyrians. It's God and Him alone. So the 2 men do that. And we know that Isaiah tells them that God has heard their prayers. And he is going to take care of the Assyrian Empire. He is going to take care of King Sennacherib. He even gives the prophetic word that King Sennacherib is going to be killed by the sword. Now, does that come true? Absolutely. 20 years after this message was given from Isaiah, King Sennacherib was killed by one of his own sons. It's amazing how that works out, isn't it? God says it's going to happen, and then it happens. Shocking. All right. So let's go to King Hezekiah. And here King Hezekiah is. He's in the house of the Lord, and here he's praying to God. He's got the message laid out, okay? So this is where we're picking up. Look at verse 15. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord. I've got nothing to say about that verse. It's pretty straightforward. And Hezekiah prayed to the Lord. Now jump ahead to verse 16. O Lord of hosts, God of Israel, enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth, you have made heaven and earth. Man, if this doesn't speak of the sovereignty of God, nothing will. For Hezekiah understands who he is worshiping, the creator of all things. O Lord of hosts. He knows that God is sovereign over the heavenly army. The cherubim, the very angels, God created them. He is over them. For he is over all things, over all the kingdoms of the earth. And what does that mean? If he is over all the kingdoms of the earth, he is ruling and reigning over the Assyrians. No. Now let that just sink in for a moment. We know that it's God who has brought up this empire. And for what reason? To bring his wrath upon the northern and the southern kingdom for rejecting him. But God was gracious and merciful during that time. He warned them over and over and over again. But let it just sink in. The Assyrian Empire could not do a single thing without God. The power they had was given to them by God. The wicked rulers who were placed in that position of authority, they were placed there by God. He rules over all, even those who reject him. He reigns and rules. Not a single thing happens without God decreeing it. You alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth, you have made heaven and earth. None of this would be here if he had not spoken it into existence. You think about that power, you think about that sovereignty, and there's times when we're going through a dark place, and we're thinking there's no way out of this. I can't do anything about it, but then we have to stop and think, who created everything? God. For he is the sovereign one who rules and reigns. You going through that dark time, that's not a surprise to him. That path was laid before you were even born. But there is a reason for it, and sometimes we do not understand that reason on this side of heaven. Other than this, he will be glorified. So Hezekiah in this prayer is recognizing God in all of his glory, his power, his grace, and his mercy. And we also know leading up to these verses that Hezekiah understands that there's nothing righteous about himself. There's nothing righteous in the people of Israel that deserve God's protection. Once again, we see his grace and mercy over those who have rejected him time and time again. Hezekiah is stating that you are the true living God of Israel. You are God alone. There is no other God than you. Now look at verse 17. Here he is, message laid out before God, and he cries out, "Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see, and hear all the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to mock the living God." We know that King Sennacherib, king of Assyria, he worships the false gods, the gods that aren't real, the gods that have been created by human hands. The only ability that these false gods have are the ones that man has given them. And I don't know about you, but do you want any ability that man has given you? No. Because that ability is not from man. It's not real. Which is why Hezekiah is wording this in the manner in which he is. Because he is saying that there is only one true living God, the God of Israel. And this God, the sovereign God, can hear his prayers. Can the false gods hear your prayers? No. They're false gods. They don't have ears. For the sovereign God can see all things. Can the false gods see anything? No, they were created by the hands of men. Just wood and stone. And who gave us wood and stone? That would be God. He created that. For when it comes to the almighty sovereign God, it is man who relies upon him from our very first breath to our very last. We are at his mercy. Whether people proclaim him or not, we are at his mercy. And this is what King Sennacherib refused to understand. For the very words he sent in his last message to King Hezekiah, it was just blasphemous. He is blaspheming the Holy of Holies. Camp on that for a second. Blaspheming the Holy of Holies. What kind of wretch does that? Well, that was every single one of us before the Almighty Sovereign One rescued us, regenerated our hearts. Because truly, when it comes down to it, apart from Christ, you know who your God is? It's yourself. You think about the arrogance of the Assyrians, of all those pagan lands surrounding them. They believed that their hands could create false gods. Or gods, I should say. They wouldn't consider them false. Duh, Britt. But anyway, even the powers that those gods had were given to them by man. We're going to take the attributes that we like, and that's how we're going to create our gods. Do you see how arrogant that is? How narcissistic that is? But that's man apart from Christ. For what we're doing when we reject the truth about God is we are elevating ourselves above Him. And man, when they elevate themselves above God, they are on a true path to destruction. For it's the fall of every empire, every nation, when God is denied, when He is rejected, and when man is elevated. That nation will head to its own destruction through God's wrath. And it's not like you can put a period of time on it. We don't know when these empires are going to fall, but they do collapse. They will come underneath God's wrath. It's exactly what happened to Assyria. It's exactly what happened to Jerusalem. It's exactly what happened to Rome. For a nation that does not hold to God as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, they will feel His wrath, and He will prove to them that He is the one and only sovereign God. For every nation that has ever existed that doesn't hold to the standards in which God has laid out there for us, they come to worship the false gods in which they have created, and they will fall. Now, sadly, do you know what we think today? We're far more intelligent than our ancestors of the past. And I think if we were to truly look into it, we'd realize that we are probably dumber. Honestly and truly. Because we think, well, we're not going to create any false gods to worship. Why would we do such a silly thing? Right now, the United States is worshiping the god of wokeness. And there are numerous denominations. We have the god of climate change, the god of sexuality, the god of Black Lives Matter, the god of politics. And we tend to think that we don't worship false gods. But we have sadly continued in the same sins that our ancestors were guilty of, that the Assyrians were guilty of, that the pagan lands were guilty of, that Rome was guilty of, that Jerusalem was guilty of. For we have created gods that we want to worship instead of bowing the knee to the almighty triune God who demands and deserves our worship. Okay, sliding into verse 18. Truly, O Lord, Hezekiah is still praying here. Truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste all the nations and their lands. Now, what King Hezekiah is praying here, of course, is historically true. Assyria has been an empire that has laid waste to whatever and whoever gets in their way. Whoever they wanted to conquer, they would take it. Now, most of these nations, if not all of them, were far more superior than Judah. And every one of those nations were conquered by the Assyrian military. Now, King Hezekiah recognizes this, but he also knows that none of those nations that were destroyed by the Assyrians worshiped the one and only true God. And we see here that King Hezekiah wasn't going to bend the knee to Assyria. Why? Where's King Hezekiah's faith? It's not in those false gods who have absolutely no power over anything, but it's in the Almighty Sovereign One who rules and reigns over all things. That's where his faith lies. And Hezekiah wasn't going to allow the people of Jerusalem to bend the knee to Assyria. Because there's a huge difference in placing your faith in the Almighty, ever-living God and one that has been made up by man. So we're seeing through King Hezekiah's actions the removal of the false gods from the land of Jerusalem, removing them from the temple. But his words have changed now. His words are proclaiming faith in God. That's where he's looking for protection. The other nations bent the knee to their false gods, bent the knee to the king of Assyria. Their prayers went to those false gods. Their sacrifices went to those false gods. And what did that bring them? Look at verse 19. We see what Assyria does to every pagan land that they enter into and take over. For they have cast their gods into the fire. For they were no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they were destroyed. For there is only one God who can save man. I said this earlier, but the only reason the Assyrians had the ability to conquer the nations in which they did is because of the one true God. God had decreed for that to happen. He gave them the military might. He gave them the power to fight. He gave them the wicked men to lead that military. Now, there may be this thought roaming through your mind right now. So God placed the wicked in charge? Is that what you're saying? Did he put them in the position for this wickedness to play out? Yes. And this shouldn't be shocking to any of us. Nothing takes place in this world that God hasn't decreed. Nothing surprises him. He's not sitting up in the heavenly realm looking at Jesus going, I did not see that happening. That took me by surprise. It doesn't happen. God uses whatever means to bring about his glory. And if that means bringing up a wicked, powerful army led by horrendous men to wipe out all the other false God-worshiping nations, and in doing so, making them more powerful and more powerful, so that the world would fear the Assyrians, for the world to think that the Assyrian army is indestructible, they're invincible, only so that God can what? Take that wicked army and wipe them off the face of this planet. And to prove what? I am the true living God. I will crush those false gods you put before me, and I will crush that invincible army that you believe has all the power in the world, and yet I am the one who is sovereign and powerful. For his glory, he does what's pleasing to him. Now we're going to close after this, but let's go to Psalm 1:15. Let's look at verses 2 through 8. I think this speaks perfectly where we are right now. Why should the nations say, "Where is their God?" Our God is in the heavens. He does all that he pleases. For their idols are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths, but do not speak, eyes, but do not see. They have ears, but do not hear, noses, but do not smell. They have hands, but do not feel, feet, but do not walk. And they do not make a sound in their throat. Those who make them become like them, so do all who trust in them. You see, those false gods had no power whatsoever, which is why the Assyrians were able to toss those false gods into the fire, because they could. Gods made by the hands of men are powerless. The ideology that we follow in the secular world today, that we have replaced God with, it is powerless. We see Hezekiah's true faith here, which is another reason why we should not worship or put anyone above the true, living, triune God. For he is not of this world, but the creator of it. Why would we want to take something that he has created and then with our own hands make a God that we want to worship? Do you know what that is? Stupid. Plain and simple. That's what it is. It's arrogant. It's narcissistic. But above all else, it is stupid. So here we have this small little country that King Hezekiah is ruling over. And this massive empire is looking to crush them. And yet, Hezekiah's faith is in the one true living God. Now, if you want to see how this ends, you're going to have to come back next week. This is what we call a cliffhanger. All right. Jacob, my friend, you care to close us out, sir?
Don't you want to ask if there are any questions?
Well, we actually have a meeting afterwards, so yeah.